All right, it's 10 o'clock. I'm going to call the meeting to order on this beautiful Monday, March 31st. Uh, First order of business, are there any additions or deletions for the agenda? Hearing none. Next up is approval of our minutes from March 17th. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Moved by Loretta. Is there a second?
Jen will second it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any edits, discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay or raise a hand. And any abstentions? All right. So the next fun part, we need to elect a vice chair. For anyone not present at our last meeting, Anthony Cambridge, who was our vice chair, was replaced by, shoot, I'm forgetting who. Loretta, do you remember the name he gave?
Whit
Whit.
from
Whit Montgomery, who actually I'm not seeing here.
Yeah, I thought
What
it was
is
going
think
to be
he's in
here.
class today.
What's up?
I think he's actually in class today, Mark.
Got it. Okay. I know we had an issue getting the invitation on our last meeting, so I just want to make sure he got it. Anyways, Anthony was our vice chair, which leaves us with the gap on that. So I'm looking for a nomination for a vice chair.
I'll nominate Loretta if she's willing.
Thanks, Commissioner.
I'll second that.
Loretta, do you accept the nomination?
I'll take the hit for the team, Mark.
Thank you, Loretta. Are there any other nominations before we move to a vote? All right.
I move nominations close quickly and we go to a vote.
Great. All in favor of Loretta as the vice chair, say aye or raise a hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Loretta.
I'm abstaining.
Any opposed? And one abstention from Loretta. Any other abstentions?
I was just kidding.
It's okay if you want to vote or abstain. That's your choice. I usually come from a group where we nominate the person who didn't show up. So I appreciate you taking the hit, Loretta.
So we should have nominated Whit, is what you're saying.
That's where I would have gone with it, but we've elected you, so congratulations. All right. Next order of business is to review level 1 curricula materials. I received nothing. Chris, did you get anything?
I received nothing other than what you sent me last week, Mark.
Okay. I know I talked to Ken and I'm waiting on feedback from Ken before we do anything with it. We can go through the superload escorts now. We have time, or we can pass over to the report. What's the body's will?
I'll leave that to the body to discuss. Ken is doing driver training this morning, so he's not going to be at this meeting. Dan's sitting in on his behalf. But I'm happy to have the time, at least if you folks decide it's worthy of going over the materials that you presented.
Sure. Let me just open it up. Just sanitizing confidential information from my screen. Give me one moment. All right, you should have this in your email from last week when I sent the agenda, but I will also share my screen. So just a basic outline. for commercial vehicle escorts, and more specifically, you'll hear me refer to these as superloads. Generally, these are requiring law enforcement when a vehicle is larger than certain dimensions or weights. Examples of superloads, we've escorted houses, nuclear power plants, tanks, things that are like 150 feet long, things that weigh like 200,000 pounds, things that are like 15 feet tall that don't navigate under bridges well. So that's basically what requires law enforcement. Department of Motor Vehicles issues permits to commercial vehicles based on the varying laws and regulations. And so they don't always require law enforcement presence, but generally when they do require law enforcement presence, it is because this thing is ridiculous under some measurement, and law enforcement can basically be rolling traffic control. The goal of superloads is to effectuate the move of the load while keeping everyone safe. So I've established, or I've created this completely in a vacuum based on what I know. Years ago, I want to say about 10 or 11 years ago, the Sheriff's Association, in collaboration with Department of Motor Vehicles, came up with a statewide model policy around these. So a lot of that's drafted from this. I've talked to DMV since we started working on this conversation and have made either some minor updates or acknowledgments where there are gaps that we need to update for today. But at the end of the day, it's still pretty robust and accurate, with maybe a couple things that we can add on. So learning objectives, I have understanding the policies and procedures, which is around safety and infrastructure protection, and how DMV establishes what they need to do. How to prepare and coordinate. It's not just show up, turn on lights, drive. There's pre-work done. There's engineering analysis done by the company. So it's understanding the obligations that they need to go through, the permitting that DMV generates, what an approved package looks like versus someone started the process. Basically, it's a knowledge base of what happens before it. So when it lands in the law enforcement officer's hands, it's not just a pencil whip of let's move big thing to place. Verifying that the load that we're about to move is number one in operational legal compliance. So doing records checks, verifying the company is operating in a legal manner, ensuring that people have insurance for the vehicles, addressing any, what I'll call a lay officer's ability for safety or mechanical issues. These are not generally performed by people who have obtained either state or federal motor carrier standard certifications for commercial vehicle enforcement. This is obvious stuff like, hey, the big thing is not strapped down. Hey, there's a flat tire. Hey, you have completely crushed your trailer and this just doesn't look safe. So it's a low standard in terms of what would an average person recognize. These vehicles do undergo inspections at DMV's discretion by certified commercial vehicle inspectors, and we're not asking or expecting anybody to attain that level to perform this traffic control element. And then also discuss weather and road conditions to determine safety for an escort. Operationally, when you're doing the escort, what's that look like? Basically, a lot of it's the pre-plan, communicating the plan, how do you communicate during the move, and discuss what do you do when everything doesn't go right. Configuration and the reasons why we have them configured that way, how to navigate an intersection. So if we think about this, it's basically 1, 2, 3, 5, at least a 5 vehicle convoy, all around the purpose of moving big object in the middle. If you end up at a traffic light and the first vehicle makes it through the traffic light, what's the rest do? We're not condoning blowing stoplights and stop signs and all the things. We're condoning safe travel. And so how do we manage those types of events and deal with emergencies should they occur, though knock on wood, they do not. And then what to do at the end, especially if something happens, did not go right, and how do we communicate that to Department of Motor Vehicles, who's ultimately issuing the permit. All of these are related to state highways. They do not address local ordinances. I call that out specifically because most of them do follow state highways, and most ordinances we just won't have any view or surveillance of the changes, evolutions of how those adapt. Does not mitigate or remove any obligations or responsibilities around local ordinances. It's just the local jurisdiction that establishes what those rules are. For competencies, basically it's demonstrating, I think most of this could be knowledge-based, but through like a test, knowledge base of everything we just talked about with learning objectives. And then and how we test for the competencies, I'm recommending that we do a written test for competencies 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then we do, as best as we can, practicum or a demonstration of determining a vehicle's pre-escort inspection. And so that should be a fairly reasonable thing to attain in the context that we might not have a commercial vehicle to do an inspection on, but we could go up to any vehicle in a parking lot and say, okay, we're doing a pre-ride inspection. Let's look for placards. It doesn't have any. Let's look for working lights. They're not on. Let's check tires, tread, things like that. And so you can do a walk around of a vehicle. Here's the measuring of a car. It's 18 feet long. The permit's up to 160 feet long. Okay, we're within the permitting regulations. Do we measure from the bumper? Do we measure from the front tire? Where do we measure? But basic things to walk through that. So I don't see a testing practicum for that inspection to be a high bar to reasonably perform, but it is an important one to perform. In addition to these, the Federal Highway, who are they? FHWA. I don't know if anybody knows what that stands for. But they're the ones who wrote this. They've developed guidance for law enforcement escorts, which basically runs through everything we just talked about and serves as a guideline for how to do the things and will serve as a basis for developing the curriculum. I'm scrolling through it quick. Sorry to make anyone motion sick. Federal Highway Administration. There we go. So they're the ones who drafted that. There's also a complementary, but not necessarily directive escort course. And so anybody who's seen oversized load, they usually have escort vehicles like amber lights that assist them for a variety of different things. We have that pilot escort course, which has, again, some related elements, but also completely irrelevant things for law enforcement does. So the idea being we can capture some of the information in this, and then we can also exclude what is not relevant to law enforcement. Examples of an escort versus a pilot. An escort basically serves to help the person or the super load, oversized load navigate the roads. If I were to use an analogy, their job is to make sure the square peg fits through the round hole. A pilot is generally going to be a person who will help navigate, actually perform an operational function for the square peg to fit through the round hole. And so using an example of like a 150-foot long vehicle, it might need to have a rear articulating trailer, which basically means the rear axle of the furthest end of the trailer steers, or maybe a middle portion of the trailer steers. It's not a common thing that we see with vehicles. There's usually very strict guidance issued by Department of Motor Vehicles around how fast the vehicle can operate when rear articulating trailer is used. That is piloted by a second operator, which is different than the operator in the tractor pulling the load. And so they walk along the vehicle and basically help it navigate an intersection, a corner, traffic, bridge, whatever it is. So that's broad strokes, the differences. But this is about a 400-page course, so I won't scroll through all of it for the purposes of this meeting. This has all been sent to the Academy for an initial review to make sure we're barking up the right tree. But certainly if anybody has comments, feedback, before Ken does his review, happy to take them and better the submission. If everyone thinks this is a reasonable way forward, and we get approval from Ken, then we'll start with the development of a curriculum for the course. That's my pitch.
Mark, I'll just add my 2 cents that this is that pilot escort certification course is fairly comprehensive, and it seems that you could just pick and choose the pieces that you wanted out of that to draft what the curriculum looks like. I don't see this as being really difficult. I guess my question is there somebody from this committee who is going to be designated as the person to draft that, or are you looking outside of the committee to have somebody put together what the draft curriculum looks like? Because I agree with the learning objectives. I think the testing out is done well, but certainly it can be a fairly small piece of curriculum, I think, or one that doesn't require the extent of what you have in that PowerPoint, obviously.
So to the WHO, I agreed to take on building this, and I'm working with Sergeant Genevieve Paul from DMV, who is the training sergeant for DMV, to help develop what the law enforcement course will look like. So column A, column B, it's internal and external. Certainly if there's anyone who wants to join on with me, more the merrier, but I know that this is a common thing for for sheriff's deputies to do. And I think I'm the only sheriff's department that's representative on this committee. So I'm not sure who else has insight, but we welcome it. Maybe Trevor cares from a municipal standpoint with ordinances, but I see his head shaking no. So I won't turn away help, but this is also a nuanced area, so not surprised if anybody says no.
Mark, one more question if I could ask. So this would cover, at least in my mind, one of the required additional courses to meet the satisfaction of a level 1 certified officer. Would this
Correct.
be encompassing vehicle escort and traffic control, or would you be seeing them as 2 separate training pieces?
I do see them as 2 separate training pieces. Sheriff Mark Poulin either is or has certified instructors on a different program from, I'm going to say, U.S. Department of Transportation, which sub-department, I don't remember, but it's the Flaggers course, which has been adapted to be a law enforcement traffic direction and control course. So he's working on developing that portion. I see them as complementary to each other. However, one is the stationary function and one is the motion function. So there's related factors, but they're also separate components in their own rights.
Okay, thank you.
What could be, and I think that the proof would be in the pudding on this, is I don't know how long this course should be. I know there's a recommend from the committee, but putting the presentation together, developing out the learning objectives and everything, I don't know how long it could be. It might be a 4-hour class, might be an 8-hour class. I'm thinking 4 hours, which probably means I should think 8 hours. But if I am correct that it's 4 hours, it might be this is a morning block and then the afternoon block is the traffic direction and control class, or vice versa. Because they have related goals and concepts, but they do it in 2 different manners. I would also submit, Chris, that this is probably, while we're building it for level 1, this should probably also be an in-service class delivered for people doing these things.
Sure, no, I agree.
Any
I think
other? Oh, go ahead.
when I just look at the framework of the required core and elective courses that we had discussed initially, it looks like, and again, I don't want to frame this around this course should be X number of hours, right? I think we should take it in ones that require some real specific skills and, attention that our recruits are going to need to, like, for instance, crime scene investigation. Typically that's an 8-hour course, but I think you could do things like traffic control within 4 hours, obviously. It's not, I think let's just try to build it around the competency and not worry so much about what the hour content is that what it's going to end up being.
Yeah, I think there's a cultural shift there, Chris, that I'm still wrapping my head around. Not to say I disagree with it. We just, practically speaking, say, okay, I'm sending a person to training. Is it all day? Is it half a day? What's that resource commitment? So we come back to hours quickly just from an administrator mindset, which I know you understand.
Yeah, and again, don't disagree with that. I just think as long as we're being able to prove the competencies at the end, that's the most critical. And I think it'll fall into practice with what already exists currently. Most classes are either a 4-hour block or an 8-hour block.
So the question I do pose, and I think this would be relevant to all the things, but if I get the thumbs up from Ken, we move to development of the curriculum. Is there a template of what learning objectives should look like? Are there rubrics? Are there frameworks for slideshows, like that have a little picture of a seal? Like, I don't want to put a bunch of work into creating a presentation only to say we have to go copy and paste everything to the new workbook.
There is a framework that you can certainly look at from, already being developed by Atlas that you could follow to determine what do the competencies and the learning objectives look like and how do you get there. So absolutely, you can provide you that framework.
Great. Anything for the Superload commercial vehicle escort curriculum?
Great job, Mark.
All right. Rob, where are we at on the judicial stuff?
It's still in development. My training person left for Disney for a week and a half, so I couldn't round out my curriculum. I've met with Ken on it and gone over the fundamental framework that we need to develop. So we're just in assembly really at this point. So I hope to have something for next meeting.
Awesome. And I don't know if I've said this before, we might have mentioned it last meeting, but the basic construct is we bounce materials, learning objectives, competencies, and the testing off of Ken just to make sure we're barking up the right tree. Build the curriculum, that'll be reviewed by TAC. And then if it's approved by TAC, it would be adopted as a curriculum. Is that still correct, Chris?
That would but that would be a recommendation from the TAC to the council that they've reviewed that and it meets the competencies that they're looking for. So yeah, it would end up being final council approval.
Okay. Cool.
Mark, one more question. Is there a discussion about who would be, or has it been decided yet, who would be the drafter of the piece around prisoner transport?
That's a nebulous question. I don't know. Or I should
All
say
law
the answer is
enforcement does
nebulous.
it, right? I mean, all law enforcement does it, but it's also, key to what some of the judiciary likely needs to, encompass in theirs. And so it crosses all of those. I see it more as a courtroom added function that would be to and from the court, but obviously not all encompassing.
Yeah, I mean, logically, it makes sense for, I'm going to say broadly, the Department of State's attorneys and sheriffs to develop this curriculum. They house the state transport deputies, and what I would submit is that this is actually not a general law enforcement function. Yes, law enforcement arrest people, put them in car, drive them to jail, police department, whatever. A fresh arrest transport's a lot different than, and very simpler than a lot of the other transports that are involved. And so we could start talking about extraditions. We can talk about governor's warrants. We can talk about mental health, juvenile transports, all sorts of things that have a lot of nuance to them, which sheriffs have been doing for decades, if not longer. And sometimes they get introduced in the legislature for all law enforcement, which then become a good measuring stick of just how much is involved in the transport. So what I would propose, if we can engage someone who's willing to do this, is that we focus more on the not fresh arrest transports, because I don't see a level one dealing with those. They are dealing with the court movements, the correctional facility movements, the interjurisdictional movements, theoretically even flying armed, but that's a whole different conversation. That ties into federal law and state training practices. Commissioner.
Mark, I don't know if this is relevant here, but it seems like a very good opportunity to standardize the policy of transporting people in custody across the state. And I would start with an accredited agency's policy and then add the stuff that's specific to courtroom, because I know that there's definitely stuff related to the courtroom, stuff that sheriff's deputies do that is not generally done by municipal or state law enforcement. We just sort of drop them off and hand them over. But I think it's a great opportunity to try and get some standardization. And if you're going to do it, it might as well take into account transporting people on mental health, mental health or other medical considerations, juveniles, etc. So just a thought.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I do believe, I'm not positive on this, but I believe Act 30 from last year mandated Department of State's attorneys and sheriffs develop a policy around transports. And while it is not an accredited law enforcement agency, they do have attorneys and people working on the policies themselves. So certainly if you have any transport policies from an accredited law enforcement agency, either in Vermont or in another state, I'm happy to funnel those to the people doing the work there. And that could very well tie into this curriculum development, but nothing has passed yet.
So the state police are accredited. In fact, they just got re-accredited for the third time last week. So if you shoot, thank you. If you shoot me an email, I will send it to the right people and they'll email you the transport of in custody subjects policy.
Great. Are you aware of any other states that have policies as well? Maybe that are similar to Vermont?
I'm really far out of the game. Sorry. I just have
That's
not
fine.
kept up with the policy writing space in terms of outside of the state of Vermont.
And since we're on the topic, Trevor, do you know if your policy folks are familiar with anything in law enforcement transport of prisoners?
I would have to reach out and ask, what their current level of knowledge around the country. I mean, they work all around the country, so they might. I certainly can ask.
I will float an email to the two of you. Anybody else I'm missing? Rob, do you have insight into that stuff?
Yeah, I was just thinking I can check with all the New England court directors and see what they have for their policies. I mean, Connecticut's the marshals and Maine is marshals as well, so they would have stuff.
Great. New Hampshire might just be too different from how we operate to consider the policies themselves for operational stuff, but the way that their interfacility movements work is significantly different than ours. I do know that. All right. Moving on to document I closed. Our draft report. So we haven't looked at this in a while. So over the time that we've been meeting, I've started just pasting stuff in here. I'm not wedded to format, content, or anything. I've just been taking what we had and plopping it in as it goes. It's not completely up to date, but at the end of the day, at least a starting point. This is all introductory stuff of who's participated, a framework around what our existing training is, current statutes that tie to scope of practice, goals that we establish early on, areas of high liability that we've identified, defining what some of these things are. And then this is probably about the point where I started falling off. I'm copying and pasting stuff in. So one of the things that we've developed is our SWOT analysis, which I think we should drop into here. And then we should start bulking out what these things are. I also have a separate document that includes our overall policy recommendations that were adopted by the council. So we'll include that into this section. Chris, are there areas in the report that we should have that aren't included here? I know I just blew through it pretty quickly, so we can go back, but that we should have in a report. And I think another question is, who's our audience for the report? Is it the council? Is it another committee? Is it the
I think
public?
the audience for your report should be for the council. You know, without looking at this document in its full, I can't really speak to what you just scrolled through, but
Sure.
I think, you know, I think it's realistic to frame what the SWOT analysis showed, but I don't know if it needed to be in the depths of where it went. You know, we knew what we were lacking and what we were trying to accomplish, and I think that's more what the objective is for the council to try to, you know, sink their teeth into. But I think understanding, you know, they've already approved for the recommendation of what was going to be in these courses. So I think it's just really the outline about how you came to there and the content behind it. I don't know that I have this though, Mark. If you could just shoot that to me so I could take a look at it, that would be great.
Yep. Yeah, what I'll do is I'll go through the repository of stuff I have and plop it all in, and then we can start adjusting from there. I take absolutely no responsibility for any typos, notes that I wrote that are inaccurate, or anything like that. Because again, this has just been dropping it in as we talked about it, and it might not be, in fact, what we voted on. So please verify any of the details. I don't know if we said 60 hours and 120 hours for FTO, but I can drop that in from what our formal or finalized recommend to the council was. Chris, is it Ken who would have the framework for
It is.
curriculums? Okay. Maybe what we can also do is include a recommendation for distributing the framework so that we can get curriculum development running. Anyways. I'm happy to go back to other parts of this report. Is there anything anyone would like to see? Having just scrolled through it briefly. Are there any areas or recommendations people would like to include that boil to the top of your mind? Hearing none. That's my agenda for today. So we are on to public comment.
I'd just like to thank you for finally getting some of this stuff in the works and moving. I know it's hard with everybody's schedules and, you know, people being already engaged in other activities, but this was all it's a lot of work still to be done, but I appreciate it finally starting to get a little bit further ahead.
Thanks, Chris. Loretta?
Mark, I know I was supposed to put something together, and I'm not exactly. My memory's fading, and I don't remember exactly what that was with Jason and Anthony. Could you remind me and what I thought? And I know Jason's not here today, but I thought what we could do is put Wit on that since he is a level 2E and get him involved, and then I'll try to get that before our next meeting.
Yeah, you and Jason, along with Anthony, so now Whit, were tagged in for defining current responsibilities of level 2 certified officers related to motor vehicle enforcement and patrol.
So basically, regular duty. Gotcha.
Yep.
So current responsibilities for those officers that are working as a full officer. Gotcha. That's
It doesn't necessarily have to be a full officer, but I mean, what does motor vehicle enforcement look like?
A shift officer, should say.
That's the thing, though. It doesn't have to necessarily be a shift officer, though we know that they are being used in that regard. We also know that they're being used in supplemental ways. So the State Highway Safety Office has enforcement grants, which some level 2s only do that work and they don't do any patrol work. So we should look at the full breadth of what does motor vehicle enforcement, and I would say separately patrol, mean, and what's it mean in the context of different organizations. For example, I'm making all of this up now, but just as an example, if Fish and Wildlife has a deputy warden who does snowmobile enforcement, who's a level 2 certified officer on the 1 week that a warden is on vacation, we should capture that. I don't know if this is the case anymore, but if state police use auxiliary troopers that are level 2 certified to do a boat patrol, we should talk about what does that mean.
They don't. They only use level 3 officers.
Okay. So we should look at the broad scope. We should consider constabularies, what sheriff's departments do. We should consider if, I don't know, if liquor and lottery uses level 2s for anything. I'm guessing not, but we should try to get a scope of what does patrol mean. And I think that general duty patrol officer would certainly be the obvious one, but we should look at what other ways are they being used. And then motor vehicle enforcement is connected to patrol, but sometimes we're going to have places who deviate from that. And so a few years ago, there was that discussion on taking motor vehicle enforcement out of law enforcement and giving it to community service officers or a title by a different name. And so what does that look like? In some communities, we're looking at the level 2 program to say they're not going to do that. Brattleboro just implemented within the last year, I think they call it the Brat Squad. Don't ask me what it stands for, but my understanding is they are going to have level 2 certified people who are going to perform what I've seen in other communities as community service officer functions. So what are these things that are coming about, and do they use level 2? Would there be contemplation by an organization to use level 2 if it were developed in a way? All those things. Tom.
Yeah, I'd also be curious to know how many agencies use level 2s as supervisors in the state, and what does the dynamic around that look like? I know it's a thing.
Would you be curious with that question related to patrol or motor vehicle or broadly? Because we don't have that as a broad category, but certainly an interesting one.
Well, I don't know how they would act as a supervisor just for traffic control things. I mean, I guess it's possible. That's a good question. I was thinking patrol. But...
I mean, you could have a court officer.
Well, we have level 2s that are FTOs. We also have level 2s that are checkpoint supervisors.
So level 2s who are FTOs for other level 2s?
And level 3s who are So for example, a waiver level 3 can be FTO'd by a level 2 and then move on to that level 3 position. Which,
I mean,
Wow,
realistically, there is no level 3 field training under the council rules, so
Hmm.
you don't have to have a certified FTO to do FTO of a level 3. In fact, there's several agencies who do not. So I'm not sure how far we want to
Okay.
dive down the rabbit hole of the FTOs with level 2s and what they
go back up
FTO.
go back up.
But certainly supervisors or supervision could be an area we want to consider, because here's another thing. I know there's agencies who have non-certified people who act as supervisors at some level. That could be at a management level or at a direct supervision level, that aren't certified. I think that there was a police department county north of me that had a non-law enforcement officer as the agency chief. So I don't know that we want to pull that apart too far. That might be venturing out of the scope of what our level 2 program is looking to do in the reality, because just making it up. But there was a conversation when Brian Peake came to Montpelier about him just doing the level 2 because he was just going to go be chief. But then the agency needs, he was doing patrol work and level 3 work, and he had background and credentials that related to level 3 waiver. And so he went into the level 3 waiver program, but that was a tenuous waiver process for him based on the agency needs. So there's opportunities that people may look at to say they're going to do a level 2 for certification purposes, even though they're functionally never going to do the work. Tom, would you be opposed to just overall level 2s as supervisors as a broad category?
To explore? No, that sounds. I think we should.
So this is the next fun part. Would you be willing to take the lead on it?
Sure. Yeah.
And is there anyone willing to join Tom? Oh, Whit's not here. I guess Whit's on this one now. All right, what else do we have?
Mark, I am not volunteering to be part of this. However, I would point out that there are some agencies that only employ level 2, and therefore supervisors are only level 2 certified. So probably need to make sure that we talk to those agencies as this work is being done.
Could I ask a minor request, while I understand you're not volunteering, Jen, that you pass
Yeah.
along any agencies you're aware of to Tom and Whit so that they can dive down the rabbit hole?
Sure. Well, the Grand Isle County Sheriff's Department immediately comes to mind. So I will pass along others if they jump to my mind.
Great.
You have my email.
Anything else for public comment? Hearing none. Looking for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Loretta. Is there a second?
Second.
Second
Can
by
you stop the
Trevor.
recording before you leave, Mark? Just Chris and I want to hang on here.
I can. I don't know if when I leave, if that ends it for everyone or not. So
No,
you
if
might
it-
have to
if it
connect
does,
on your
we'll
own. But
reconnect. Yep. Thank you.
you guys can sort that out. All in favor of adjourning, say aye or raise a hand.
Aye.
Opposed,
Aye.
you can stick around with Chris and Trevor. Take care, everyone.